While brands chased horsepower, a bunch of broke kids on TikTok quietly took over the motorcycle world. Now riders like you are getting left behind. This isn't a trend. It's a full-blown industry reset. And if you're not paying attention, you've already missed it. Watch till the end, and you'll see what the brands don't want old-school riders like you to find out. What's happening? It started with a sound, a rev, a helmet snap, and a head turn timed perfectly to a TikTok beat. What followed was not just another trend, it was a full-scale cultural shift. BikeTok, a niche corner of the internet just 2 years ago, has now become a viral machine, funneling millions of young users into the world of two wheels. But this wasn't born from traditional dealerships or glossy ads. It came from the raw energy of content creators, barely out of university, capturing the thrill of riding on their phones. These weren't legacy influencers with gear sponsorships. They were broke kids on cheap cafe racers, e-bikes, and salvage sport bikes, filming first rides with trembling hands and iPhone cameras taped to gas tanks. And the internet loved it. Each post wasn't just a video, it was an invitation. Gen Z, disillusioned by rising car costs, student debt, and congested cities, found a new kind of freedom, one that could be captured in 15 seconds and replayed endlessly. Within a matter of months, BikeTok evolved from a content trend into a full-blown identity. Riders weren't just posting for clout, they were finding belonging. Edits of golden hour commutes, motovlog rants, and DIY mods formed a community that felt fresh, chaotic, and irresistible. For many, this was their first introduction to motorcycling, and it didn't come from a brand, it came from a vibe. If this hits home so far, drop a like and tell us what you're riding. What started as quick dopamine hits on a screen suddenly began dictating what showed up in the showroom. From views to sales, the viral bikes that broke the market. Dealerships couldn't explain it at first. Seemingly overnight, interest spiked, not in the latest super sports or flagship cruisers, but in used Ninjas, stripped-down cafe builds, and underpowered scooters. The data was clear. The bikes going viral on TikTok weren't the ones manufacturers were promoting. They were the ones that looked good at golden hour, cost less than a semester of tuition, and could be modded with a weekend's worth of effort. Across Europe and parts of the United States, beginner bike registrations grew dramatically. In countries like Spain and Germany, motorcycle sales jumped by close to 15% in a single year. But this wasn't driven by middle-aged hobbyists. It was 20-somethings in cities, fed up with parking fees, rising car insurance, and public transit delays. These weren't gearheads. They were students, artists, freelancers. And they weren't buying based on spec sheets. They were buying what they saw in their feeds. Retailers who had once stocked floor models with endless chrome and tech-laden dashboards found themselves suddenly fielding requests for stripped-down, retro-style bikes. The Royal Enfield Meteor, Honda Grom, and Yamaha R3 all surged in popularity. Not because of dealership promotions, but because of looped videos on TikTok with captions like, "First ride ever, life changed." This was not a tech spec revolution, it was a culture-first movement. People were no longer being sold bikes, they were discovering a lifestyle through their phones and then chasing it on the street. Once the sales data caught up to the screen time, everything the industry thought it understood about Gen Z came crashing down. Skip the hype. Ride with gear that actually holds up. We link the jackets, gloves, and essentials real riders are using, not influencers. It's all in the description. Gen Z doesn't want your leader bike. For years, the motorcycle industry has operated on the belief that bigger is better. More power, more displacement, more torque. The leader class sport bike was the crown jewel, sleek, fast, and absurdly powerful. But to Gen Z, it's overkill. The disconnect between manufacturers and first-time riders has never been wider. To many new entrants into the motorcycle scene, flagship models like the Yamaha R1 or Kawasaki ZX-10R represent everything wrong with the industry. Intimidating power, unapproachable price tags, and excessive tech bloat. Gen Z isn't impressed by another 5 horsepower gain. They're not looking for adaptive cruise control or riding modes they'll never use. They want something small, simple, and affordable. A bike they can drop without crying. Something that fits in their apartment garage and doesn't scream midlife crisis. And as the average entry-level bike balloons in size and price, the idea of a true beginner bike is disappearing. Displacement creep has taken over. Bikes that used to be classified as middleweights are now pushing power levels that rival previous flagships. Even so-called entry-level machines like the Ninja 500 are inching into territory that makes them intimidating and expensive for real newcomers. Legacy engineers were chasing power and missing the point entirely. Brands laughed at BikeTok until the sales crashed. At first, OEM executives laughed. TikTok? Really? They scoffed at the idea that 15-second videos could compete with polished ad campaigns, legacy dealer networks, and carefully curated brand partnerships. But they weren't laughing when showroom interest plummeted and inventory started gathering dust. The problem wasn't just that Gen Z wasn't buying flagship models, it was that manufacturers had bet the farm on them. Over the past decade, OEMs shifted resources toward high-margin, high-tech machines. They cut back on affordable platforms. They streamlined production lines to prioritize emissions-compliant giants stuffed with electronics, and now they were out of step with the market. Meanwhile, BikeTok exploded. New riders weren't watching commercials, they were watching creators like Moto Bambi and Gearless Josh tear around on cheap modded bikes with their friends. They weren't talking about traction control or Bluetooth sync. They were sharing memes about stalling at red lights, crashing on their first ride, or DIYing a cafe tail out of a pizza pan. By the time the brands realized what was happening, they were already irrelevant in the conversation. Some scrambled to pivot, launching TikTok accounts or sponsoring influencers, but the damage was done. The cultural wave had moved without them. Because the virality wasn't slowing down, and the old guard had no idea what was coming next. One viral clip sent shockwaves through dealerships. It was a 15-second clip of a rider weaving through city traffic on a matte black cafe racer. The caption read, "3 grand, 2 wheels, 1 life." Within 48 hours, it had over 3 million views, 500,000 likes, and sparked a comment section filled with, "Where can I buy this?" The problem? The bike wasn't even listed in most dealership inventories. It was a heavily modded second-hand unit, something the traditional motorcycle sales pipeline was never built to support. Dealership owners watched in disbelief as foot traffic suddenly shifted from high-end models to hyper-specific, hard-to-source builds. Sales staff were blindsided by requests for retro-style street bikes, minimalist designs, and starter models under $4,000. Their showrooms, stacked with $20,000 cruisers and tech-laden supersports, suddenly looked irrelevant. Inventory sat untouched while the demand moved somewhere else entirely, toward the kinds of bikes that sold instantly in private Facebook groups, Craigslist threads, or direct-to-consumer e-commerce platforms. Supply chain expectations began to crumble. The bikes people wanted were not being manufactured at scale. Dealers were overstocked in all the wrong segments and understocked in all the ones TikTok had made famous. Managers scrambled to shift orders, but the system was too slow. Traditional sales forecasting based on historical trends, past model years, and product cycles meant nothing in the face of a viral video. One viral trend was enough to wreck an inventory cycle. The next wave changed who consumers actually trust, how micro-influencers overtook motorcycle marketing. There was a time when motorcycle marketing meant magazine ads, polished product photography, and expensive brand ambassadors in custom leathers. In a world where trust is currency, authenticity wins, and corporate polish loses. Viewers are no longer drawn to celebrity racers or scripted showroom videos. They're watching garage builds, first ride fails, late-night coffee runs, and chaotic helmet cam banter. Micro-influencers, riders with followings small enough to still seem human, are the new gatekeepers of motorcycle culture. They are honest about the flaws in their bikes. They talk about repair costs, insurance headaches, and what it feels like to drop your bike at a stoplight. And because they are real, people listen. This shift has exposed just how out of touch traditional marketing has become. Brands are still pushing aspirational narratives, freedom, adrenaline, escape, while the new wave of creators are pushing reality. Their impact is measurable. Google search trends, dealership inquiries, and manufacturer site traffic now spike after influencer shoutouts, not TV spots. When dealerships realized they weren't the main characters anymore, their old tricks started looking even worse. The dealership experience is pushing riders away. It should be a moment of excitement, the day you walk into a dealership to buy your first bike. But for a growing number of young riders, it's where the dream dies. Instead of accessible prices and helpful guidance, they're hit with bloated fees, aggressive upselling, and financing traps designed to lock them into 5-year loans. The base price might say $5,000, but the out-the-door total balloons fast with destination charges, setup fees, and documentation costs that feel like legal robbery. For Gen Z riders already wary of debt, this is a deal breaker. Many enter with budgets under $6,000, only to discover that even beginner bikes, once all the fees and gear are factored in, creep dangerously close to $10,000. Add to that a required riding course, insurance premiums, and the cost of safety gear, and you're looking at a hobby that costs more than a used car. Dealers try to ease the sting with low monthly payments, but the fine print reveals high interest loans and ballooning long-term costs. And it's not just about money. It's about trust. Riders report being misled about warranty coverage, pressured into unnecessary upgrades, and given false promises about service timelines. Horror stories circulate on BikeTok of first-timers walking in with savings and walking out with regrets. The damage is cumulative. Every negative post erodes confidence. Every hidden fee creates a viral rant. And for many, the final decision is simple: skip the dealership altogether. With trust eroded and buyers disillusioned, OEMs tried a desperate pivot and made everything worse. OEMs tried to go viral, and it blew up in their face. By the time legacy brands realized they were being left behind, they launched their counterattack. Official TikTok channels, influencer partnerships, and new model releases designed for viral appeal. The results? A mixed bag of corporate cringe, expensive failures, and missed signals. One manufacturer dropped a teaser for a youth-focused naked bike, complete with LED lighting strips, a touchscreen dash, and a sky-high price tag. The BikeTok comments were brutal. "This is for the CEO's nephew, not us." "Cool, another bike I can't afford." "Where's the actual bike? All I see is buttons." In their rush to join the party, OEMs forgot the one thing that made BikeTok powerful: relatability. Their content felt forced, their partnerships looked scripted, and their products, instead of stripping back complexity, leaned into feature overload. Instead of engaging the culture, they tried to imitate it, and failed. Meanwhile, grassroots creators kept winning. A guy in Milwaukee rebuilding an $800 CB 750 in his backyard got more engagement than a multi-million-dollar campaign. Riders on budget bikes became local legends, and the harder OEMs tried to manufacture cool, the more obvious it became. They didn't understand the people they were trying to sell to. And now that gap is costing them everything, because the next disruption was already on the horizon. Small brands won big by listening to the internet. While legacy manufacturers fumbled with failed viral campaigns and overpriced tech bundles, a new class of motorcycle builders quietly stole the spotlight. These weren't bloated corporations with global supply chains. They were nimble, community-focused startups that listened. They didn't chase prestige, they chased relevance. And their secret weapon wasn't budget, it was instinct. Brands like Janus, Cleveland Cycle Works, and Brixton leaned directly into what the online riding community wanted: simple bikes, modest price tags, timeless aesthetics, and a culture-first identity. They watched BikeTok not as outsiders, but as participants. They saw what types of bikes creators were showing off, and they built them. They read the comments and designed for the frustrations. And most importantly, they treated riders not as customers, but as collaborators. Janus, for example, created bikes with old-school style and modern reliability, specifically aimed at entry-level riders who valued charm over specs. Brixton embraced vintage silhouettes and stripped-down electronics to make bikes easier to customize and repair. These brands didn't just sell motorcycles, they sold a vision of riding that felt inclusive, local, and emotionally grounded. Their bikes showed up organically in content, not because they were sponsored, but because they made sense. They didn't need an influencer budget because riders became advocates on their own. They felt seen and they showed up with their wallets. While new voices rose from TikTok comments and Discord servers, the old giants were busy clinging to silence. HarleyDavidson's downfall started with silence. There was a time when Harley-Davidson didn't need to chase trends, it set them. Its logo alone evoked rebellion, freedom, and Americana. But when Gen Z started riding, they weren't looking for legacy. They were looking for affordability, flexibility, and online community, and Harley had none of it. While BikeTok exploded, Harley stayed quiet. Its core marketing remained locked in a decades-old identity. Bearded men, desert highways, throaty V-twins. To a generation raised on climate anxiety and gig economy realities, this didn't feel aspirational. It felt like cosplay for dads. The average Harley price tag didn't help. A new rider browsing for their first bike would rarely look twice at a model that cost more than $20,000 before gear, insurance, or licensing. And Harley's attempt to modernize came too late and too clumsily. Its electric live-wire model was bold, yes, but aimed too high. At nearly $30,000, it landed as a statement piece, admired but ignored. The brand's TikTok presence, when it finally appeared, felt corporate and out of step. Meanwhile, smaller accounts were mocking Harley's weight, price, and aesthetic with thousands of likes. The next generation wasn't just walking away from Harley, they were hitting a wall the industry never bothered to fix. The middleweight void. Why no one feels at home. Motorcycle progression used to feel natural. Start with something manageable, gain skill and confidence, then step up into a faster, more refined machine. But that ladder has been broken. Today's riders often start with lightweight 300 to 500 cubic centimeter bikes, and then look around and realize the next step is either an intimidating 1,000 cubic centimeter monster or a budget-stretched compromise. The middleweight category, once rich with options, has been hollowed out. Bikes like the CB650R, the MT-07, and the SV650 used to anchor the mid-tier, offering just the right mix of power and price. Now, that segment feels neglected. Updates are rare, marketing is thin, and new riders are often left wondering where to go next. The cause is partly financial. OEMs see more margin at the top and growth at the bottom, so the mid-range gets ignored. But the impact is cultural. Riders who want to stay in the sport, who have outgrown their first bikes but can't afford or don't want a track machine, are hitting a dead end. The ladder is missing a rung, and many fall off entirely. So when no one filled the gap, a new kind of machine rolled in and took over without permission. The rise of e-bikes. Gen Z's two-wheel rebellion. It didn't come with fanfare. No glossy launch, no press release, just a flood of TikTok showing teens and 20-somethings zipping through traffic on e-bikes, laughing, filming, and parking wherever they wanted. No license required, no insurance hassle, no oil, no noise, just throttle and go, and suddenly electric bikes weren't fringe anymore. They were everywhere. Across Europe and Southeast Asia, e-bikes and electric mopeds have already overtaken traditional motorcycle sales. In cities like Amsterdam, Seoul, and Barcelona, Gen Z riders don't even consider gas options. Why would they? For under $2,000, they can get a street-legal, smartphone-connected e-bike that charges overnight and costs almost nothing to maintain. In the United States, the trend is newer but growing fast. Brands like Super 73 and Ride 1UP are turning heads and winning minds. These aren't just mobility tools. They're fashion statements, lifestyle extensions, and social props. They're featured in music videos, action edits, and unboxing reviews. For every Gen Z commuter priced out of a real motorcycle, an e-bike feels like freedom without the friction. Original equipment manufacturers barely registered the shift. focused on refining gas performance and meeting emissions benchmarks, they were blindsided. Now they are scrambling to produce their own electric alternatives, but they're already behind. The audience has moved, the culture has shifted, and the idea that real motorcycles must roar and rattle is being replaced by something quieter, cheaper, and infinitely more viral. And if the industry thought BikeTok was the end of the storm, they hadn't seen the real aftershocks yet. The factory lights are going out. In towns where motorcycles were once a source of pride, jobs, and generational livelihood, the silence is deafening. Assembly lines have slowed to a crawl. In some places, they have stopped altogether. Factory lights flicker off as manufacturers pull back from high-cost production centers in North America and Western Europe. And for workers on the floor, the message is clear. The world they knew is being left behind. OEMs are not making these cuts lightly, but the numbers are brutal. As viral trends continue pushing demand toward cheaper, simpler, and electric alternatives, the expensive infrastructure required to build heavyweight ice bikes no longer makes sense. Brands that once bragged about American or European manufacturing are now shifting production to regions with lower costs. Thailand, Vietnam, and parts of South America are quietly becoming the new centers of motorcycle manufacturing. To the workers left behind, it feels like betrayal. Instead, they were phased out. For local economies, the loss is catastrophic. These jobs supported neighborhoods, schools, and small businesses. When a factory shutters, the damage radiates outward. Empty lots, evicted renters, lost identity. The labor revolt. No one saw coming. The sound of protest is growing louder. Across shuttered factories, paused production lines, and gutted distribution centers, workers are organizing. Unions that once negotiated over shifts and overtime are now fighting for survival. In some cases, they are fighting to simply be heard. At first, the transition was framed as inevitable, an unfortunate side effect of innovation. But as layoffs mount and factory closures accelerate, that narrative is crumbling. Labor leaders are now calling it what they believe it is: abandonment. Workers who spent their careers assembling motorcycles are being told their skills no longer matter. Worse, many are being offered nothing in return. No retraining, no compensation, just a severance package and silence. In Spain and Italy, walkouts have already begun. In Germany, there are talks of class action litigation against companies that accepted public subsidies and then offshored production. In the United States, the picture is murkier. Right-to-work laws in southern states complicate organizing efforts, but frustration is building. Town halls are erupting. Local leaders are being forced to pick sides. This isn't just about motorcycles anymore. It is about the dignity of work, the pace of change, and who gets left behind. The labor movement sees an opening, one they have not had in decades, to demand a stake in the future they are being excluded from. Now the dust is clearing, and the question isn't just who survives, it's who takes control. Want more stories they won't tell you? Hit subscribe. We're just getting started with this ride. Who wins now? Riders, creators, or corporations? In the middle of the wreckage, one group is still riding, literally. Riders, creators, and consumers now face a landscape that is both thrilling and treacherous. There has never been more access, more visibility, or more cultural momentum behind motorcycling. Yet the institutions that once supported the sport, dealers, unions, legacy brands, are crumbling. So who wins? For creators, the opportunity is massive. With traditional gatekeepers gone, micro-influencers and content builders are becoming the new tastemakers. Some are launching their own gear lines, others are crowdsourcing new bike designs or starting niche motorcycle brands backed by online followers. In a post-OEM world, content is capital, and the most trusted voices are no longer on payroll. For riders, it's complicated. Entry has become easier in some ways. Cheaper e-bikes, used beginner bikes, fewer bureaucratic hurdles. But long-term ownership has never been more uncertain. Service networks are thinning. Parts are harder to find. The mid-range category remains underdeveloped, and many fear that a sport once built on freedom is becoming overly algorithmic, driven more by what trends than what works. And for corporations, The question is whether they can adapt fast enough. Some OEMs may pivot and survive, others will become footnotes. Investors are watching closely. The old model, heavy machines, high margins, slow innovation, is collapsing. A new one is emerging, but it is volatile, decentralized, and unpredictable. Because the future of motorcycling doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to whoever can build what's coming next. The industry's changing fast. Stay ahead of the curve. Subscribe now, join the movement, and ride where the future's headed. Like this video if you're ready for what's next, and leave a comment letting us know your thoughts on the future of motorcycling.